All right, we're going to be doing chapter 5 of On World Peace. It's the book. 2 essays by the Holy Kabbalist Rav Yehuda Ashlag, edited by Michael Berg. And this is one precept we're going to be reading, chapter 5, the last chapter, the uncensored version. Chapter 5, altruism that depends on excessive egoism. The existence of various spiritual forms. We should not revoke any form of spirituality from among those who have gained for themselves a right to exist in some corner of the globe. Even if they oppose more important forms, still they should not be revoked and eradicated, literally murdered. However, boundaries should be set between them, with more given to the more important forms and less to the less important forms. This division should occur in each and every country, but it should not be done in smaller collectives, because then the method would be damaged. Here is the rule. If we understand the prohibition against the killing of people, even if they are of the lowest class and the least intelligence, then needless to say, how much more severe is it in the case of spiritual forms and ideas, whether good or spoiled, that have taken hold somewhere in the world, because everything has its own space. Leaving the boundaries. This is yet another reason to leave the boundaries between countries, as they are, because every country has its own ideas and ancestral heritage, some important and some less important, and the prohibition against murder applies to all of them. Idol worshipping cannot be revoked unless done by its practitioners. Surely it is not our duty to coerce people who support a certain lower-level idea if they have started using it. On the contrary, when an idea is being discarded by its believers, this indicates that the idea no longer brings any benefit, because every idea needs time for development and growth until one can grasp whether the idea is good or whether it is bad. And this is the entire vitality of the lesser ideas that we have to deal with. That is, we have to see their inferiority, because understanding evil has as much value in the process of gaining wisdom as understanding good. However much you enjoy, to that extent you are taking away from my world. And however much you cause others to enjoy, to that extent you are causing delight to me, and I will be proud of you. And to the extent that I am proud of you, I will bestow on you glory and wisdom, and pleasure and delight with full generosity. And if you enjoy, you will cause lack in my world, and then my ire shall be raised against you, and this lack will be your responsibility. Woe to those who are partying in my vineyard, each one digging with a hoe, as a miner in his mine, then hides the bounty in their bag and runs away. Family egoism and individual egoism. Excessive egoism was given to people only to develop love. It is as if someone wants to plant a fruit tree. To do that, he has first find the seed that pertains to that tree, and afterwards, through work and development, you will finally merit seeing its fruit. And so with cultivating love, you have to start with a nucleus that is capable of giving rise to love. And I shall tell you this nucleus is the individual egoism with all its disadvantages, dwelling as it is on jealousy and lust and pride. Then, through family life, the narrow egoism develops and extends to include the whole family, because the person loves his spouse as his own self and his children as his own self. And thus narrow egoism is extended into a wider territory. And this is what has been prepared by the first level of nature, namely the animal instinct within all of us. And afterwards, a quality was found in human beings to be in need of life, of togetherness with others, and thereby his egoism widens to include the entire neighborhood, or the city, or the country, because a person's own individual good depends to a great extent on the entirety of his community. And this is the second level, which is natural as well. Then the work starts to become more profound, to understand that the foreigners who have only recently come to settle in his community also must be given as much love as the people of his own town. These foreigners may be poor at the moment, but following the path of the wise maintains his foresight literally the wise as his eyes in his head, he can foresee that with time, it is possible for them to become rich, and he would enjoy their company. The degree of love. And the path of education brings people a lot closer. This means understanding the degree in its entirety, which is love your friend as yourself. Leviticus 19:18. Understanding it starts with what it is said, do not ignore your own flesh. Isaiah 58:7. That means loving members of your family. For this, it is not necessary to demonstrate it to a specific degree. When it comes to life of the community, it is necessary to demonstrate the degree of love your friend as yourself. And also in regards to the foreigner, 2. Love him as yourself. A good order of development for love. At first, one should become strong in loving oneself to the fullest degree, because the nature of the human being from infancy is to be lazy. And even when it comes to our own good, we are comfortable to neglect the work. This is why there is jealousy, lust, and pride, etc. Altruism depends on egoism. After this, it is necessary to climb up the above-mentioned stages to the same degree that one has already attained and earned for oneself. As it is said, love your friend as yourself. And regarding the foreigners, it is said, and you shall love him as yourself. Leviticus 19:34. This means that from the start, a person must work to love himself as a person, also causes and awakens his self-love each and every day because of his laziness and irresponsibility. It is only after he acquires a narrow egoism, namely the excessive self-love, then he can extend that love to include others in it. With this, you can understand that true altruism depends on excessive egoism. Anyone who has not attained love of himself in the full sense of the word, but rather is a person of no consequence or a person of no importance, does not even have the seed of love. And whoever extends his own love of self, and then through education, extends it to love others, such a person is the real great and true person. The mistake in abandoning nationalism. Here we can see the great mistake in principle in abandoning nationalism, because successful internationalism completely depends on successful nationalism, as mentioned earlier, because everything is necessary, nothing is harmful, except that we need proper regulations and education. Loathed means harmful. One should remember the rule that nothing is loathsome and contemptuous, save only in our interpretation of the degree of its harm and benefit, its beauty and praiseworthiness. For example, it is not fit to protect a garden to have beauty and splendor if it is not useful for its growth. On the other hand, garbage and dirt are beneficial for the garden because they are useful to it and help it grow. So if we detest our egoism, it should be to the degree that it causes damage to the people in the world. But once we know the craft of utilizing our narrowed egoism for the good of the community, then surely it should be considered beautiful and worthy of praise. The development and progress depends on providence over those who fail. This is because whoever excels in collecting all the profits, small and large, and whoever is able to reach the desired benefit, is the one who is in haste to secure the desired goal. And whoever is lazy, or does not pay attention to utilizing everything that can be utilized for the sake of that which is useful, is the one who pushes away the goal and also does damage. From this, an absolute law emerges, which is, whoever wants to succeed in his or her business should not miss anything, not even a small item, that is fit to be utilized for the purpose of his or her business. You cannot trust the mind. This is because the mind does not govern the body, and a person has neither faith nor trust except to preserve himself and his offspring when they need him, being that this is how things are prepared by nature. This is a dominating physical force. Trust by acquisition. Indeed, there is still a way for the proper trust to gain a foothold in a person through acquisition, and it is trust in the Creator. Trust in one's friend, even though he has gained trust, is still not true trust, because it must be conditional, literally depends on something. Since nothing can be eternal, then this trust cannot be eternal, and therefore there is no trust here. This is not the case with regards to the Creator. Although trust is conditional, Nevertheless, it fits to be eternal, since the Creator is eternal. For this reason they have said, from not for its own sake, he shall come to for its own sake. I'd say the main point of it is the name of the chapter was altruism that depends on excessive egoism. So many times we think about the goal, that the goal is altruism, but we forget about the way to get there. And that the way to get there is actually by growing our egoism to the size of altruism. So altruism is the Creator, and we start with a very small ego. The idea is to grow our ego to fit that size of the Creator. If in my ego I care about the entire world because the entire world is part of me, then that's the way I can reach that altruism, passing the barrier.
Well, when it said that everybody comes basically as they are, it's just an interpretation. Call them foreigners and whatnot. So anybody outside of the quality of bestowal, we just take them from where they are and bring them through the process.
I think it depends on the desire of the person. So if the person wants to join us on this goal of increasing his ego to the size of altruism, then he's considered a friend, and then we work on cleaning concepts together. While the rest of the people, it's more like we use them in a passive way. So we can't get response from them, but we can still see how they work, how the Creator works through them, and collect discernments on that level. While with the high levels, then there's actually interaction. You can talk, you can share concepts together, you can clean each other. While with phase 1 and a bit of phase 2, you can't. It's one way, so you can get discernments from them to you, but you can't give back. They don't want to actually hear anything. They just want to stay where they are. But with higher phases, then there's actually an interaction of give and take between each other.
So it's actually a win-win when we do that. Both parties win.
Yeah, because the idea is that just because someone's on a low phase, you don't know when he's actually going to get upgraded to a higher phase. You don't know when his ego is going to reach the point where he wants to actually have power over his situation and not just be in the filling of his situation. And when that desire comes into fruition, then that's called the point in the heart, that desire for power, that desire for controlling my perception. Because at the end of the day, we come to Kabbalah because we want able to control our situation. We have an experience. We feel that endless pursuit of filling is not working out. And many times we have a desire, but we can't seem to bring it out. And Kabbalah is there to help us understand how we work and grow us to that perspective of the system, to understand why everything is perfect right now from a system perspective. And the more I join that perspective, the easier my life will be, because I'll understand why it's happening. We can see this with the difference between adults and children. So children have a very limited perception, and adults have a much wider perception than the children. So many times the adults will make decisions, and the children, because of their smaller perception, they don't understand, why did daddy have to go to work? They don't have, they can only think of themselves or their close friends, and they can't think of, more responsibility, more power, more effect over others.
So when you have experiences that are out there, not in the Kabbalistic circles in the society, but out in the public, you still get those discernments from those experiences as well, right?
Exactly. It's just one way. So, when I go to work, or when I'm with my family, or when I watch movies, or any kind of phase 1 entertainment, I get loads of discernments, but it's just one way.
So when you get those experiences and it brings you joy, what does that mean? What does that mean, like when you feel like you're fulfilled as far as having all these what we consider bad experiences? What does that mean?
Well, wouldn't there be a difference between confirmation of scrutinies, as in I'm confirming where I'm at, I'm seeing within my own reason what's going on, and the opposite being actual growth? So when I'm with a group, there's a chance for growth, but when I'm by myself, it's like I'm testing out what I have so far.
Exactly. With phase one, you're more testing out your current degree, while with the group, you can actually raise to higher degrees. But again, because of that interaction, because you can hear how other people, which are outside of you, or look out that they're outside of you, are interpreting the system. So if you, that's why it's not, we can't just like close ourselves in a room and just read all the books, because no matter how I understand it, it will always be in my current level of perception. And by actually talking with each other, then we can hear perceptions that we would have never thought of ourselves. And that's how we can expand ourselves. So, and this works even on a higher degree. So you could have someone who's, let's say, in phase 4, and he goes to a group where they're all phase 2 people. So you could say, well, how does that help him? Well, because it expands the degrees that he's been in before. It's like someone who's on a trip, and he's well ahead of where other people are. But then when he talks to them when they arrive, they're like, oh, did you see this? Did you see that? And he's like, no, I didn't see that. Thanks for telling me. So it's the same way. It doesn't really matter what degree you're on. You can always use the lower and higher degrees accordingly.
Yeah, it helps change your perception and what you're experiencing at that moment.
Exactly. We see it in physicality as well. When you're going somewhere and you ask someone, where is a shop? And you think it's far away, and they say, oh, it's right next door. You're like, oh, thanks for telling me. So the same in spirituality, where we're cleaning our concepts. When I hear somebody else's point of view, I can incorporate that now into my perspective as well. And that's the discernments I'm collecting. And then slowly, it builds into a desire. That's why it's so important to connect with the friends. And I think this whole workshop, which has happened in the last few years, has really accelerated the growth. Because beforehand, it was more that you only had just one person you could actually interact with, was the Rav. And with the friends, it was more of a passive relationship, more of a phase 1 relationship, even though they were in phase 2, but the interaction was phase 1. And then when the workshops came, it actually allowed everyone to raise to phase 2 and actually start hearing each other's interpretations of how they understood stuff.
So isn't this, if we wanted to get all structure, assuming you've crossed, okay, so if you haven't crossed, I'll go pre and post. If you haven't crossed the barrier, so to speak, it would be as if these interactions are to build a desire to get across. But then it feels like if you're across the barrier, that the interaction, well, depending on where if you just crossed the barrier, it feels like working on the screen, being this thing called the Shabbat zone, is actually being able to handle the tension between all the phases, because you're going to see extremes out there in the society, and some of the docile extremes might bother you even more than the aggressive extremes. So it's just all these different places where people are at. It feels like you have to be able to build in the tension to work with literally all of them.
Exactly. The main difference between before the barrier and after the barrier is before the barrier, you're building that vessel, you're building that desire to become the creator. And you've reached that maximum ego of desiring the primacy of the creator, because what could be more egoistic than wanting to be the creator itself. And then after we pass, then we're working in the role of the creator, and we're actually building our internal power and learning how to handle it. So then the question would be, then why would you have to go back down to the lower phases of before the barrier? Phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 of humanity, the spiritual society, the group, and the individual. Why would I have to go back? But the things that you actually, most of the time, actually spend time in those phases because you want to help others reach where you are, because you need more of a foundation. So the idea is that in spirituality, on one hand, you have this aspiration to go to this high place, but you need that building below you to actually bring you there. So it's like you're building a pyramid underneath yourself. So every time you add more and more discernments and add more friends and more connection, it builds a pyramid underneath you and pushes you up. So on one hand, you have to have this aspiration to reach the top, but on the other hand, you need these lower vessels to actually build underneath you and push you up to actually get there.
So when you're having discernments and you're scrutinizing everything, and then there's more experiences on top of that to give you more scrutinies and discernments, what does that all mean? That, I mean, it's like test on top of test on top of test on top of test, and it's like, okay, is it just going to keep going? Or, you know, what does it all mean as far as the Creator thinks we're stronger than what we are, or we're just bringing on so much that we're just so overwhelmed? I mean, what does it mean?
Well, you know, you can,
Wait a sec. That's
yes.
a weird one, because we got to talk about what the Creator is, and is the Creator really the one giving me this? Like, the definition of Creator feels like.
Okay. Am I the one that's bringing all of these things to me?
Who else is there? Part of the perception we're trying to build is this concept of individuality, that each person experiences his world as his own, and that there is no other force than the internal power within that individual. So the entire experience I'm seeing is still through that one force going through me. So there's not like I'm dealing with multiple forces here, and you know, I've got to deal with the force of Brent and the force of Shelley and the force of Moshe and the force of Yohanan. But rather, I'm only dealing with the force within me, and its expression is through the people I see around me. That's why there's no one else but him. That means there's no one else but the internal power within me that is portraying this whole picture in front of me. And the whole idea of collecting all these discernments and concepts which layer on each other, just like in any concept, you know, in mathematics, the concepts layer on top of each other. It would be hard to learn multiplication without adding. So the idea is that when we come, we are collecting more and more of the picture of our perception. We're building our perception. We're building this view on the way we see the world, to understand how our internal power is driving us and to align with that. So instead of what a broken intention is where our internal power is pushing us to gain more power, which is bestowal. Bestowal is power. If I'm bestowing to someone, that means I'm actually controlling them. I'm giving them, I'm passing power to them. And the more I understand that bestowal, the more I can get of it. That's going with the goal of creation. But a broken intention is when we're going the opposite direction. We want tranquility. We want relaxation. We want death. We don't mind working our entire lives in order to reach, you know, fishing at the seaside, like that relaxation. I'll become a great CEO in order to relax. So the goal, the broken intention is in the goal that we want to reach that tranquility instead of reaching that power, which always has tension behind it.
Right. I don't want to relax. I want to keep going, but I just want to know. I want to know in my own self that what I'm bringing to me is something I need to correct, and that's why I'm having these experiences, that I'm not correcting my perception. I need to adjust it more.
The idea is not to fix reality, remember. So it's not if I see people die in the world, correcting my perception doesn't mean they won't die. And if I see someone getting killed, doesn't mean that, oh, there was a problem in my perception. The problem in my perception is the way I respond to it. So if the Creator has decided, because of some, you know, system structure, that a certain person needs to be murdered by somebody else, that was the system's decision, and that's perfect. The problem is that my perception doesn't see that as perfect. My perception sees that as a bad thing, as something's gone wrong. So instead of seeing it as a growth and seeing it as, you know, Baal Hasulam gives the example of a fruit, that a fruit before it's ripe is deadly. If we see this whole system going towards a direction and it's perfect in that growth, that's where we're trying to reach. You can be at the end of correction at this moment. So even if you're at the end of correction, people will still die, people still get sick, people will still be sad, but your perception is corrected. So that means the way you view that reality will be totally different. So you'll have a person on a low perception level will see someone dying. You'll say, this is terrible. That person had a choice. Why did he decide to murder the other person? This is terrible. Why would the Creator allow this to happen? And that's a lower perception. A higher perception would understand more of why this is happening. And even if he didn't know the specific reasons why it's happening, he would be okay with it. He would understand this is going to the right direction. But at the same time, he's joining it. So it's not like I just look at the side and I let everybody continue dying and the world continue going as it is. And I'm just like, oh, the Creator is perfect in everything he does. I actually join it and actually enhance and speed up the correction of perception in other people. And then, of course, the result changes accordingly in reality.
Okay.
That guy?
Yes.
I forgot, and excuse me and correct me, is it David or Daniel that prayed for sickness to come to people because they were just dying and nobody had time to say goodbye? And that was his intention behind that, was he wanted people to be able to say goodbye to each other. So that's sort of a perception that we can correct. Instead of looking at the sickness as a terrible thing, look at it as this is you would have been dead, but now you got time to say goodbye to your loved ones, kind of thing. Is that where we're going with perception?
Well, we can see that many people, they actually go through real changes when they actually see someone die, for example. They go to a cemetery, someone's just died or murdered or whatever, and then they start thinking about the real questions. They start awakening themselves. What am I here for? Why is this okay? So if everything was hunky-dory and everything was lovely, that would actually kill the goal. It would make us plateau. So it's funny how they actually, all the things that cause us pain are actually the things that give us the situations to actually become stronger and actually ask more questions of where we're going. Well, if we're just given happiness, we don't ask questions anymore. Many of us would, if the world would suddenly plateau and everyone would reach happiness, we would stop learning Kabbalah. We'd think everything's fine and this is the way it's meant to be. Turns out the Creator has a different goal. His goal is to actually get us to this power, and he is not willing to stop at causing people pain and suffering in order for them to get there. But the thing is, he's always doing the same thing, so he doesn't actually change depending on the person's action. It's the person who changes. So the Creator is always trying to give us situations for empowerment. He's always trying to give us situations to increase our scrutiny, to increase our awareness, and to increase our desire to actually, turn this tension into power. So if we succeed, then we actually are able to take these situations of tension and actually learn from them and empower ourselves accordingly. Or we can just continue having that tension build up into us until it overflows, and then it forces us to convert it into power.
Well, it seems like a major perception change that has to happen is that it's not about the relationship that we have here with people, but it's about how we interact in those relationships to see how the Creator wants things to be, or the relationship with Him. So just the idea that things happen so that we can enjoy one another, have things like that. I don't know.
I agree. Like one of the problems is that if the goal is not strong enough in a person, he will plateau on the connection of the friends. He'll be like, oh, I found the friends, and that's it. And I'll stop there, and there's no actual need for me to actually advance and actually become that individual. And excessive egoism. Like, he doesn't say that the idea is to be lovers. He says the idea is to become this excessive egoistic person that wants to basically swallow up the entire world into himself, and say, this whole world is actually me. And I will be the one who actually gets that power. And if every person actually does this, this actually causes a situation where you've got more people empowered, more people independent, but you've also got more tension accordingly. because it's very easy for us to all lower our egos, and then there's no tension. But it's death. And what we're trying to reach, this point where there's just so much tension between us, that so much power that we're actually, and we have to accept this process, because otherwise we'll just break from that tension. So the only way to actually handle this tension is constantly having acceptance of growing it. And then we can reach this point where the stony heart, which is that substance that stops us from able to enter each other's perception. So the only thing stopping me from suddenly living my perception as Brent, or Brent suddenly entering my perception, is the stony heart. So and we always know that the only way to correct something is by revealing it. So unless we reveal that stony heart in its maximum size, it can't get corrected. How can we correct that tension if it's not there? We always have to reveal something before we can. We always have to reveal the concealment before we can convert it into revelation. And I love what it said, that, he said, true altruism depends on excessive egoism. Anyone who has not attained love of himself in the full sense of the word, but rather is a person of no consequence or a person of no importance, does not even have the seed of love. And whoever extends his own love of self and then through education extends it to love others, such a person is the real great and true person. We see in the society, sometimes people say, oh, I'm of no consequence, or I'm not important, the friends are important. And he says that means you don't even have the seed of love. The love grows from within and goes out. It's like Baal Hasulam's definition of, of altruism was the centrifugal waves going out. So it goes from within and cascades outside. Exactly, you can't give what you don't have. Yes, Andrew. So it comes from wanting to just jump to the goal and just skipping the whole method. So, the creator is altruistic, I'll be altruistic. It's like, no, there's a process. You have to go from this excessive egoism, this self-love, to its maximum size, and then it just breaks out like an atom bomb and just covers everywhere. And if we don't reach that, then we're just like, we're trying to drive without fuel. It's like, the creator gives, I'll give. Yeah, but who says you know what he gives? He doesn't give filling. The funny thing is that if you actually give money to other people, you make them dependent on you. You don't make them independent. The best way, the highest level of charity is actually to give someone a job. Because if you give someone a job, then they're not dependent on you anymore. They can get their own money, and then they can help other people empower and get jobs. And that's how it circulates. But if I just give people money, there's no chance that that person will ever able to escape his situation. And he won't able to give that money now to other people either. So it's a very limited area of surface that I can cover. But if I empower other people and I give them the ability for them to understand how their desires work and how to clean their concepts, then they can go to other people and clean their concepts as well. And then it becomes this centrifugal waves just going out to the entire human race.
That guy?
Yes.
The tension part. It seems to me from experience, but I want to know everyone's experience, that when I keep it in, the tension grows and becomes stronger. If I open my mouth to start flapping my jaw, then I relieve it. And so how does that relate to others' experiences? Because if we want to keep the tension, that comes with me keeping my mouth zipped in situations where there is tension building and putting it inside so it digests and becomes the flower that it's supposed to be. But I'm so interested in seeing how other people see it.
It's a balancing act. Yeah, go for it, Brent.
I was just going to say that it's sort of a difference between phases. When I'm able to handle, or when I'm struggling with inner tension, as in what's going on with me, how I'm relating to other people, and other people haven't even really said anything, but I'm sort of solo like a lone wolf, even when I'm not with everybody, and that seems to bother me. That's a difference between when I'm able to step into the group and then I have to deal with the tension that I hear from everyone else. So it's just like internal phases that are different.
And the idea is to go in and out. So it's not once you have a state of tension, you don't have to keep it going. It's been revealed. And the best way to actually internalize it is not to leave the tension going, but to accept it and accept that tension. And that's the best way to, on one hand, remove the tension in the room, but on the other hand, actually, it internalizes it. So it doesn't dissipate. It just goes straight in because you're accepting it into your heart. So it goes straight in and actually turns into that internal power accordingly. So it doesn't mean if we're on a descent, we don't have to suffer alone. The best thing to do is actually call a friend and discern it with them and go from that emotional level to that speaking level. The emotional level is the animal level. Even animals have emotion. It is to go to the speaking level, which is discernments, actual conscious discernments. And you do that by calling a friend, and you don't even have to tell them that you're in a descent. You call them and you try and figure out something. You read a text together and try to discern, what are the secrets there? What is it actually talking about? So it's not just to have the tension and then just say, oh, I've got the tension, let me just keep it going. You want to reach the next level of tension. So it's all about moving forward all the time and switching between the ascents and descents. It's never about enjoying any one of them and staying there. It's all about moving all the time forward to the next step, the next step. What can I do next? Like we see with children. You give them a toy, they play for it, and then they want the next toy. You're like, I just bought it to you. It was an expensive toy. They're like, no, I want the next one. And we have to do that as well. We have to be children in that way and just constantly grow our desire to move on to the next phase, whether good or bad, the way we feel right now.
I just want to say I didn't mean to say that I keep it and hang on to it. I just have to let it digest and do its appropriate actions before I can. I guess what you're saying is get the discernment from it. Thank you so much, because that was very enlightening and clarified it in my mind.
In one of the articles, Hastening Time, I think it's number 10. I think it's number 10. About that you have the 5 levels. You have the still, the vegetative, the animal, the speaking, and the spiritual. The still is physical time that we have, on our clocks and watches. The vegetative time is our biological clock, the growth of our body and other vegetative forms. Then we have the animal, which is emotional. So in the still, you'll say it's an hour. In the vegetative, you'll be like, the baby's meant to come out in 9 months. It actually came out in 8, or it came out in 10. With the emotional level, which is the animal, you'll say, I'll be out in 5 minutes, and you take an hour. It's like, no, it was 5 minutes. It was 5 emotional minutes. Or you say that's the longest hour ever. That's emotional time. So an hour is always an hour, but you can experience it longer or shorter. And then you have the speaking level of discernments, is when you go outside of that emotional level, where I'm feeling the pain, I'm feeling the tension, and you look at it from the side. And that's why we actually connect to the friends, because it allows us very quickly to disconnect from our current emotional state and look at it from the side, because we're trying to listen to what the friend has to say about our state. And then that automatically disconnects us from our emotional state and allows us to think, oh, how does the friend see my state? That puts you into discernments. That's why it's so important when you're having a descent to actually call a friend. And that's why we build these relationships when we're in an ascent, so that they can support us when we're in a descent. And then by the number of discernments you collect, that allows you to then grow in your spiritual time, which is change of states in internal power, that then cascade down, and then you get the higher levels of discernments. So you can see that when you're in a lower phase, you might be working hours to understand a certain concept, but then when you advance, suddenly you understand the concept in 5 seconds. Just like we see as kids, as you grow, you can understand concepts that when you were a kid, it was much harder for you to understand.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and there's outer tension around me, and there's inner tension within me right at this moment.
And between that is spirituality.
Yeah, it is.
That's why we say we find the creator between us and the friends. It's between that internal and external tension. That's where the power is revealed, in between.
Yeah. And my friends have helped me and helping me now.
What's offensive for?
Yeah.
And you have helped your friends amazingly and wonderfully.
But it does say excessive egoism was given to people only to develop love.
I love that line. Sorry, just have to tell you.
It's a great line. Do you want me to read it again?
Sure.
Let me read it again. 1 Precept, Chapter 5, Altruism that depends on excessive egoism. The existence of various spiritual forms. We should not revoke any form of spirituality from among those who have gained for themselves a right to exist in some corner of the globe. Even if they oppose more important forms, still they should not be revoked and eradicated, literally murdered. However, boundaries should be set between them, with more given to the more important forms and less to the less important forms. This division should occur in each and every country, but it should not be done in smaller collectives, because then the method would be damaged. Here is the rule. If we understand the prohibition against the killing of people, even if they are of the lowest class and the least intelligence, then needless to say, how much more severe is it in the case of spiritual forms and ideas, whether good or spoiled, that have taken hold somewhere in the world, because everything has its own space. Leaving the boundaries. This is yet another reason to leave the boundaries between countries, as they are, because every country has its own ideas and ancestral heritage, some important and some less important, and the prohibition against murder applies to all of them. Idol worshipping cannot be revoked unless done by its practitioners. Surely it is not our duty to coerce people who support a certain lower level idea if they have started using it. On the contrary, when an idea is being discarded by its believers, this indicates that the idea is no longer brings any benefit, because every idea needs time for development and growth till one can grasp whether the idea is good or whether it is bad. And this is the entire vitality of the lesser ideas that we have to deal with. That is, we have to see their inferiority, because understanding evil has as much value in the process of gaining wisdom as understanding good. However much you enjoy, to that extent you are taking away from my world, and however much you cause others to enjoy, to that extent you are causing delight to me, and I will be proud of you. And to the extent that I am proud of you, I will bestow on you glory and wisdom, and pleasure and delight, with full generosity. And if you enjoy, you will cause lack in my world, and then my ire shall be raised against you, and this lack will be your responsibility. Woe to those who are partying in my vineyard, each one digging with a hoe, as a miner in his mine, then hides the bounty in their bag and runs away. Family egoism and individual egoism. Excessive egoism was given to people only to develop love. It is as if someone wants to plant a fruit tree. To do that, he has to first find the seed that pertains to that tree, and afterwards, through work and development, you will finally merit seeing its fruit. And so with cultivating love, you have to start with a nucleus that is capable of giving rise to love. And I shall tell you this. This nucleus is the individual egoism, with all its disadvantages, dwelling as it is on jealousy and lust and pride. Then through family life, the narrow egoism develops and extends to include the whole family, because the person loves his spouse as his own self, and his children as his own self. And thus narrow egoism is extended into a wider territory, and this is what has been prepared by the first level of nature, namely the animal instinct within all of us. And afterwards, a quality was found in human beings, to be in need of a life of togetherness with others, and thereby as egoism widens to include the entire neighborhood, or the city, or the country, because a person's own individual good depends to a great extent on the entirety of this community. And this is the second level, which is natural as well. Then the work starts to become more profound, to understand that the foreigners who have only recently come to settle in his community, also must be given as much love as the people of his own town. These foreigners may be poor at the moment, but following the path of the way of the wise maintains his foresight. Literally, the wise has his eyes in his head. He can foresee that with time, it is possible for them to become rich, and he would enjoy their company. The degree of love. And the path of education brings people a lot closer. This means understanding the degree in its entirety, which is love your friend as yourself. Leviticus 19:18. Understanding it starts with what is said, do not ignore your own flesh. Isaiah 58:7. That means loving members of your own family. For this, it is not necessary to demonstrate it to a specific degree. When it comes to life of community, it is necessary to demonstrate the degree of love your friend as yourself. And also in regards to the foreigner, too, love him as yourself. A good order of development for love. At first, one should become strong in loving oneself to the fullest degree, because the nature of a human being from infancy is to be lazy. And even when it comes to our own good, we are comfortable to neglect the work. This is why there's jealousy, lust, and pride. Altruism depends on egoism. After this, it is necessary to climb up the above-mentioned stages to the same degree that one has already attained and earned for oneself. As it is said, love your friend as yourself. And regarding the foreigners, it is said, and you shall love him as yourself. Leviticus 19:34. This means that from the start, a person must work to love himself as a person, also causes and awakens his self-love each and every day because of his laziness and irresponsibility. It is only after he acquires the narrow egoism, namely the excessive self-love, then he can extend that love to include others in it. With this, you can understand that true altruism depends on excessive egoism. Anyone who has not attained love of himself in the full sense of the word, but rather is a person of no consequence or a person of no importance, does not even have the seed of love. And whoever extends his own love of self and then through education extends it to love others, such a person is the real, great, and true person. The mistake in abandoning nationalism. Here we can see the great mistake in principle in abandoning nationalism, because successful internationalism completely depends on successful nationalism, as mentioned earlier. Because everything is necessary, nothing is harmful, except that we need proper regulations and education. Loathed means harmful. One should remember the rule that nothing is loathsome and contemptuous, save only in our interpretation of the degree of its harm and benefit, its beauty and praiseworthiness. For example, it is not fit to protect a garden to have beauty and splendor if it is not useful for its growth. On the other hand, garbage and dirt are beneficial for the garden because they are useful to it and help it grow. So if we detest our egoism, it should be to the degree that it causes damage to the people in the world. But once we know the craft of utilizing our narrow egoism for the good of the community, then surely it should be considered beautiful and worthy of praise. The development and progress depends on providence over those who fail. This is because whoever excels in collecting all the profits, small and large, and whoever is able to reach the desired benefit is the one who is in haste to secure the desired goal. And whoever is lazy or does not pay attention to utilizing everything that can be utilized for the sake of that which is useful is the one who pushes away the goal and also does damage. From this, an absolute law emerges, which is, whoever wants to succeed in his or her business should not miss anything, not even a small item, that is fit to be utilized for the purpose of his or her business. You cannot trust the mind. This is because the mind does not govern the body, and a person has neither faith nor trust, except to preserve himself and his offspring when they need him. Being that this is how things are prepared by nature, this is a dominating physical force. Trust by acquisition. Indeed, there is still a way for the proper trust to gain a foothold in a person through acquisition, and it is trust in the Creator. Trust in one's friend, even though he has gained trust, it is still not true trust because it must be conditional, literally depends on something. Since nothing can be eternal, then this trust cannot be eternal, and therefore there is no trust here. This is not the case with regards to the Creator. Although trust is conditional, nevertheless it fits to be eternal, since the Creator is eternal. For this reason they have said, from not for its own sake, he shall come to for its own sake.
That was incredible, that guy.
Yes, it was. It was like those words just spoke to me.
I feel that this whole article that we've read, 5 chapters over the last 2 weeks, is a very important article because it covers the entire system from the method to the goal. And I feel this last chapter is a very good summary and deals with the most important issue, which is this growing of the egoism. Because, when I'm in a society and I hear people talk about the egoism as a bad thing, that's the only thing you have before the barrier, especially. All you have is your egoism. So if you're downplaying your egoism, you should be downplaying the egoism itself. What should be downplaying is the feeling that it thinks that will cause it to satiate, to actually think that by filling it'll actually reach what it wants. That's what should be downplayed in the society, not the ego itself. The ego itself is your only fuel, your only force to actually advance. And many people downplay the egoism because they don't want to advance. It's very unsettling to advance because you always have to move on to the next level of perception. You have to leave your previous ideas and conceptions behind and move on to the next one. And many times the phases are in direct opposition to the low one. So someone in phase 2 won't agree with what phase 3 is doing. He'll say, what are you doing? You're using your ego. It's all about bestowal without self-benefit. What are you doing? And the phase 3 understands phase 2 because it went through it himself. But there's no way for phase 3 to appease to phase 2 and say, no, this is how we actually advance. That's your next phase. You just haven't reached it yet. What do you think of the article?
Are you asking me?
Asking
Or just
everyone.
all of us? I am just ecstatic. I think it's like a wow moment right now. I'm ecstatic.
It makes me realize that why it is such protected knowledge for all this time, because people could really misuse it. So you must have a desire to bestow on some level. There must be a tickle that wakes you up before you can hand this kind of knowledge to someone.
But I think this generation is ready for it. This book was released in 2012. That means before that, no one publicly had access to this information.
My kids just stare at me, and I think that's a beautiful thing that I was called away on the phone because I put it on in the car, so my son was there listening and he was nodding his head. So it's beautiful that he got to hear with us because my kids get way more than I do. So I guess that was just, yes, you're correct. They're becoming ready. It is happening.
Yes. Anyone else want to get some comments on what they thought of what was read?
Well, I guess what I really liked about it was that it went in a process, and it's hard without the article right in front of me. I think it might be hard without being able to see it sometimes. Sometimes we like going back to be able to see it. But I just generally thought that it was generally instructive. That's the word that's coming to mind, but I don't know. Let me
Moshe, are you there?
I'm here, yeah. I think this is my favorite article for sure. Um, it really makes you feel a lot better about things because, well, he told you, Baal Hasulam writes about that, right? It's if you're not basically pointing yourself in the right direction of how to use the ego correctly, you're not doing it right. You have this tool available to you called the ego, and it is the only tool that you need to reach complete altruism. But the only way to get there is to completely expand it to the complete purport, everything, and basically swallow the world up. And the only way to be able to swallow everything up is you have to have a vessel ready for it. So you're constantly trying to build this vessel, build this desire to basically be everything, because you are everything. And that's why the ego was there, and that was the only reason it was built, was for it to expand, for you to give you the ability to expand it, so you can, realize, your true, purpose, your true, root. So, I mean, I think it's amazing, and along the way, on expanding that vessel, you'll get, left line things that come your way, but those are just there for you to discover more lack so that you can increase the desire. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough desire to want to increase your ego. I mean, I don't see any other way but, getting hit, because when you get hit, you're like, all right, this sucks. I want to control this. Why is this happening to me? And I want to be in control. So, you can grow your ego there because, you're starting to get more lax. You get a push. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you're surrounded by other people that are all doing the same thing, you can increase the desire that way. Why get it externally? But I'd rather have it internally and desire to have it internally always.
Well, the problem with the external is that it can be taken away from you, and it just doesn't last. With internal, it builds and it's always active. It's always alive. That's why it's called life. Internal power is called life. And without that internal power, you have death in you. And that's why when the point in the heart emerges, we actually feel the sensation of death. Every time we grow and get that left line, that is that pressing concern of us saying, I want life and I currently feel death. So every time it pulses, that's when we actually want to grow in it. It's saying, stop feeling dead and start growing.
It's kind of maybe for some of the people that haven't been in this society a long time, who here remembers who they graduated with, maybe out of their EC class or whatever at the Olam campus in Israel? But just to kind of make a point that things change a lot, and I only have one person in my grad class that's still around, 1.5 kind of. So there's a lot of change, there's a lot of equivalence of form that happens, and it just seems that we find the people that we need at the time. And if something does happen in the group, just from this article, it feels like it's better to just take it from the side and see where it's going to go, rather than forcing it in a certain direction.
I want to read what Andrea wrote. She said, it's a good reminder to discern if you're rejecting another's ideas because you've heard it done and rejected it, or if that is something that you haven't reached yet. General rule, slow down. Don't reject it instantly. Think, share, pass by, or reach up. I agree. It's all about scrutiny, and we have a tendency to immediately want to, run out and say you're wrong or you're right, and it requires more patience to be able to say that everything that's being given to me, whether right or wrong, it doesn't matter. What matters is how I internalize it and how I categorize it and how I'm building this picture. It's like someone building a puzzle, and then he gets a piece that he doesn't need. It doesn't mean that he's never going to use it. He might put it on the side and then deal with it later, but he still will analyze it and see, is it the edge I'm looking for? Is it the part I'm looking for? So we're building this puzzle, and our whole work is to figure out which pieces we need first and then which pieces we can deal with later. So there's no point dealing with pieces that I don't need currently to build with. But it doesn't mean I'm going to throw them away and get rid of them. I need them in the end to build this whole big, perfect puzzle.
Oh, I stopped mid-sentence because I wanted to tell everyone how much I appreciated their answers and contributions. But that desire for credit, and forgive me, but I'm coming from a place where I didn't have any of these desires, and I see them in others, and I see them developing me on a certain level. So this desire to receive credit, we grew up, you don't take credit, you just do it for no reason. But it seems lately a lot of people around me are wanting credit for their actions, and so I must give that to them. But wait, how does that feel? Does it matter if they're in the society or not the society? There's something about that that's hitting me from every corner, and I don't have any discernment on it.
Credit is filling. The only reason someone wants credit is because he wants filling. Do you give it or not? That's your decision. The question for us is not whether it's whether we should get credit or not. It's what do we want to get out of the credit? So sometimes, or I'd say most times, people want credit because it just makes them feel good. Sometimes people want credit not because they want to feel good, but by getting that credit, they can other people can know about it. So I have this book. It deals with the whole concept of writing holy books, and it says there, should the author put his name on the book or not? Because on the one hand, you should be humble, and maybe I shouldn't put my name on the cover. But on the other hand, it actually says that you should, because one, it causes envy in other people, and actually might make them want to write books as well. Plus, then people can share it. They know where the source is from. They can actually come for more. We see this a lot, when you know who the director is, you look up other movies, or you hear an artist, you hear music. If you know who the artist is, you hear a song on the radio. If you know who the artist is, then you can look up more songs of that artist. So that the recognition there is not just, oh, you should know that it's my song. It allows a platform for the person to able to reach other parts of their contribution or their entertainment that they're giving to the world. So it all depends on the situation. But you've got situations where, for example, like the Rambam, he wrote a book called something Moreh Nevuchim is in Hebrew, something about the perplexed. I can't remember the full name, but the idea is that he doesn't actually quote who the quotes are from, and he says he does it on purpose because he doesn't want to actually reduce their importance. Because if, for example, if he wrote something and it was, let's say, from Aristo or someone who wasn't Jewish, then it might actually reduce the importance of the quote, even though the quote is very important. So it works both ways. Sometimes you will want credit and want recognition because it can increase the value of the product or of what you're saying. But sometimes you'll do the opposite. Because you're not known, you'll actually don't say your name and you won't want that recognition in order for the thing you're trying to publicize to actually go out and not be pulled back because you're unknown or some people think negative of you. It's always about the intention. Every action we look at, that's where the perception is not in fixing the action. The perception fix is always on how we perceive the action. So we're never about like saying, oh, do this, do that. It's not about that. It's everything we do is anyway what the Creator wants. But it's always about going from action to intention. And it's so easy for us to take the intention and turn it into an action. So like, let's read an intention. Yeah, you're reading an intention. It's not an intention. An intention is something, It's your aspiration. It's where you're going in life. What is your final goal? And that's your intention. Any final comments before we close this up?
Yeah, if
Oh,
okay,
sorry.
go.
Zakai, in the article, it talked about, which I don't remember what it said. I forgot exactly, but it said something about being rich or something like that. But I didn't understand what it was saying there. I don't remember. It
It
was
was,
about a poor man being rich. I don't know
it
what.
was talking about the foreigners. So it was talking about how you should invest in foreigners, even though they're poor at the beginning. The foreigners may be poor at the moment, but following the path of the wise maintains his foresight. Literally, the wise has his eyes in his head. He can foresee that with time, it is possible for them to become rich, and he would enjoy their company.
Meaning what? If the foreigners follow the wise, they have a potential to be rich. Is that it? But right?
No, it's the idea that the person can see that by investing in the foreigners, he can make them increase their internal power, and then they can become rich, and then he can enjoy their company as well. So,
Enjoy the company of the foreigners.
yeah. So you could see it in two
What's so
ways.
important about the foreigners?
You could see the foreigners as physical or as spiritual foreigners. You can either see it as, I'm in a country and there's foreigners in my country, why should I invest time and effort in them?
Mm-hmm.
And it's saying they can grow rich and actually increase the economy of the country. But if you go for a spiritual foreigner, that means someone in phase one, why would you invest in them to bring them to the spiritual society? So it's saying that because if you bring them to society, you can actually enrich them with concepts and clean their concepts, and then they would become your friend. They would actually be someone who could actually help you advance on the path. So you can see it from both perspectives.
Okay, but then who gets rich? The foreigners? Getting the foreigners rich.
But also
Yeah,
you rich
fine.
as well.
Huh?
Also you as rich as well. Like the
Right.
richer someone becomes in the country, it enriches the entire country.
Yeah, if you're sitting in spirituality and you're sitting there alone, it's not exactly an enjoyable experience. The more people that I would have to share higher level discernments with, the greater the depth that we'll be able to get into as a group. So sometimes you see splits in groups because the quality needs to improve, so the depth of relationship between those that are desiring more can happen.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to be alone? That's the whole idea why we invest in other people, because we subconsciously know that then they'll invest in us, and that's fine. The idea is to bring it to a conscious decision.
Or we can think about it from the ultimate point of view. Maybe God doesn't want to be alone.
The God within us.
God wears lipstick.
And Prada.
Ben, do you wanted to say something as well before?
No, that actually bridged the 2 points right there. That was great.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm very glad that we were actually able to finish these 5 chapters. I think it's a very important essay. A few people already told me that it's been very helpful for them, and they've heard these sessions multiple times. And I think it's more than just the article. It's also about the perceptions that have been shared throughout. And that's what I think make this so special. So thank you very, very much. See you next time.